I feel a bit intimidated, I have to admit, attempting to pen a piece on Werner Herzog's debut film 1968 Signs of Life. I find this intimidating because I feel daunted in contributing prose of any kind to the decades-long discussions on Werner Herzog's preternatural filmography. I feel as though I ought to uncover some vital secret hidden amongst his debut film, some essential secret to the composing of film narratives, a conjuring of psychic cinematic communication. I note a paragraph Time Out has published on this film, which claims it is Herzog's most conventional film. It might very well be, although I cannot shake the feeling that this film is tapping into something intense and profound, both cinematically and, perhaps more importantly, something psychologically, philosophically of considerable depth. Before I delve into this any further, I would like to share with you a plot synopsis, submitted to IMDb by one J. Haley. During the Second World War, a wounded German paratrooper named Strosek is sent to the quiet island of Kos with his wife Nora, a Greek nurse, and two other soldiers recovering from minor wounds. Billeted in a decaying fortress, they guard a munitions depot. There's little to do. Becker, a classicist, translates inscriptions on ancient tablets found in the fortress. Meinhardt devises traps for cockroaches. Nora helps Strosek make fireworks using gunpowder from grenades in the depot. Slowly, in the heat and the torpor, Strosek goes mad, drives the others from the fortress, and threatens the city with blowing up the depot. With care, the German command must figure out how to get him down. Yes, note the foreshadowing of a later iconic Herzog protagonist. Two facets of this film's production context suggest the framework of an imperative undertaking within Signs of Life. Firstly was this film's decision to depart creatively from a short story it is based off of. Allow me to relay a synopsis of this short story, De Toll Invalid auf dem Fort Ratonneau, by Achim von Arnim. During the 7 Years' War, the young French sergeant Francoeur met and fell in love with Miss Rosalie Lilly while he was imprisoned on the outskirts of Leipzig. In the Pleißenberg, Rosalie had taken care of the sergeant who was wounded in the head against her mother's wishes. The couple had married. Rosalie follows Francois to Marseille and gives birth to a child. With Count Durand, the commandant of the city, Rosalie stands up for the sick husband without knowledge of the proud Francois. Although Francois has gone mad because of his war injury, he gets from the count on the nearby island of Raton nevertheless command of two invalids. The valet Basset, an old comrade of Francois' regiment, learns of his count's conversation with Rosalie. The talkative Basset hound visits Francois on Fort Ratonneau and talks about everything. Francois does not want to owe his position to a woman. In a terrible outburst of anger, he chases away his beloved woman, his own child, and his two subordinates. The madman declares war on the Count, and thus also on the city of Marseille. The sergeant wants to blow himself up with the powder tower in case the enemy gets too close. Francois is not kidding. In a one-man war, he blocks the sea route to Marseille with his cannons. The city's supply stagnates. Count Durand has to act. Rosalie steps in. The young woman wants to bring her mad husband to reason. The Count thinks this is impossible because an outpost told him that Francois hated his wife above all. The possessed wanted to hand over the fort in case Rosalie's head was sent to him. Rosalie confidently sets off with her baby. As she approaches, she provokes the next short-circuit reaction at Francois. The sick man pulls his hair in a fit of anger. The head wound opens. Francois is sensible in no time. Later, a surgeon removes a piece of bone from the ulcerated head wound. Francois asks the Count's forgiveness. The request is granted. The old Count even adopted the capable sergeant. The most noticeable similarities are the circumstances of the protagonist and his relationship to a particular location, the city of Marseille in the original, the Greek island of Kos in the adaptation. Oh, and the second fascinating fact read about this film's production context. The location where the production took place was a 14th century fortress built by the Knights Hospitaller. Werner Herzog's own grandfather Rudolf Herzog worked and lived for several years as an archaeologist at this site, and published translations of the ancient Greek engravings which appear in the film. This sparks my imagination in a particular way. I envision a film which sought to very deliberately depict Nazi soldiers as subject to a most familiar 20th century malaise, our sickness of purpose, where, why, what, whom can be satisfying and how. The soldier protagonist embarks upon a kind of madness which would seem typical of one afflicted by the horrors of war, but in viewing becomes disturbingly identifiable to an audience affected by the cursed privilege of boredom. As protagonist Strosek observes with alien confusion the desperate hobbies of his fellow soldiers, we try not to be reminded of when the passions of others seemed hollow, and in assuming their denial and attempts to vanquish a similar pathos to your own depressed prison have confirmed the existence of their own, suggested the universality of existential misery, and thus affirmed the dejected psyche's greatest fear, that one's emptiness is universal, and you have merely run out of excuses to ignore this. Haunted by a constant reminder of the daunting accomplishments of ancestors, European vagabond soldiers apathetically strut about the remnants of a legendary European epoch, Greece. The vast intuitive feedback is overwhelming to contemporary subjects. Those of history felt the pull of existence. We walk amongst the evidence, but what legacy is ours? One character who appears briefly in this film was actually the last surviving worker from Rudolf Herzog's archaeological assignment. It was then I realised that this information had been sourced from a DVD commentary Herzog had supplied for Signs of Life, and just when I was slightly disappointed, yet admittedly somewhat enchanted, when I couldn't immediately locate Herzog's thoughts on his feature debut, it turns out an entire commentary exists. I gained access to this commentary, and viewed the film again, with Herzog's marvellous voice accompanying its effervescent motions. Let's discuss my mad ravings about this film, and get at the source straight from the author's mouth. Here is some interesting information I noted down when viewing this film with the commentary playing over it. Herzog, on the opening shot, wanted to depict a landscape not as a background, but a representation of an inner landscape. Aesthetically, the film is informed by representations of Herzog's voyages to the island in question. This screenplay was written some time before the film's production. Herzog had won a Best Screenplay contest within West Germany. The contest was called the Karl Mayer contest, and Herzog won 2,000 Deutschmarks. This emboldened him to apply for a subsidy in a new German cinema grant of some kind, though this still was difficult as he was considered too young, in his 20s, to direct a feature film. The film's final budget was between $300,000 and $400,000. It was eventually subsidized by a young German filmmakers union of some kind. Herzog claims that the film is about hypnosis. Herzog discusses his generation of filmmakers, and Germans in general, looking to grandfathers rather than their fathers' generation for inspiration. He compares cinema to literal magic, stage magic, something which both Orson Welles and Ingmar Bergman have also stressed. Herzog, throughout his filmography, is searching for images that awaken something dormant inside of us, a secret second self of you, finding a deeper truth, an ecstatic truth, to quote him directly. Herzog compliments his editor at the time, Beta Meinke Jellinghaus. She worked with him up until 1984's Where the Green Ants Dream. Herzog never storyboards. He glances at his script and then looks around at what is in front of him. There are no rehearsals before the day of shooting itself. And that is it for my notes written down based upon listening to Herzog's commentary for Signs of Life, and now I shall continue with some of my own mad ramblings. I note Herzog employs certain traditionally avant-garde sensibilities, and with a confident conviction, a belief in its necessity to emphasize the experience. I note some unusual camera motions, a shaky tracking shot, perhaps even a crude POV. For example, take one instance of Herzog's shooting characters as they struggle up a hill, from the hip-hop in a very informal, clumsily framed fashion. It serves to make manifest the physiological vector of its central player. Now, interestingly, and to validate Herzog's production philosophies, the reason this shot was this way, according to the commentary, was so as to hide a walking aid which the actor Peter Brogel was employing at the time. Herzog's belief that the lived existence of the film set will inherently transfer itself into moving cinema experience is very much validated by Signs of Life, very, very aptly titled. To put it more crudely, you don't find the shots, for the shots will find you. Sometimes I wonder if there was a major coherent parallel between New German cinema and the Krautrock bracket in West German music at the same time. I might characterize them as sharing a similar philosophy in that they respected the history of art and art for its own sake, and the artist as a confident genius, although this inspired in them a converse, almost ironic, disdain for traditional formality. The music utilized within Signs of Life, provided by Greek composer Stavros Zahakos, is traditional folk, meant to reflect its narrative's environment. This filmic experience must capture its environment's objective sights and sounds as is, whilst distorting our subjective perceptions of them, so as to simulate madness, as cinema can distinctly from other mediums. Herzog and the West German New Wave, much like the sonic krautrock, was a proto-punk fusion of the entrenched canonization of classicism's ambitious tradition and romanticism's firebrand individualism. That might be incorrect, although I'm throwing it out here anyway. So that's my brief write-up of Werner Herzog's 1968 debut film Signs of Life. I think this film is absolutely brilliant. I'll be watching it for the rest of my life, trying to figure out its secrets, even after listening to the Werner Herzog commentary, which is absolutely fantastic, by the way. If you can seek it out, do so. And if you haven't seen Signs of Life in the first place, well, I cannot recommend enough. It's one of these... Everyone will see something different within Signs of Life, I like to think. View Signs of Life and comment on this webpage and tell me what you think of it.